There's a product that's almost perfect. It feeds a baby, it protects against disease, and it costs nothing. Because a mother's body makes it all on its own. If you're a company trying to sell baby formula, that's a problem. Because your biggest competitor isn't another company, it's the human body. So how do you sell milk to someone who already makes her own? In the 1970s, one company found an answer. It worked. It worked so well that it became one of the most condemned corporate scandals of the century. And here's the part that matters. The danger was never really inside the can. It was in who they sold it to and where and how, in a way that left mothers no way back. Let's be clear about one thing, because it matters. Baby formula isn't poison. In a home with clean water, a fridge, and enough money to buy a full supply, it feeds a child just fine. Millions have grown up healthy on it. But the product only works if everything around it works too. And that's the part the advertising never had to deal with. You need clean water to mix it. You need enough of it so you're not watering it down to make it last. You need a way to keep it clean once the tin is open. Take those things away, and that same powder turns into something else entirely. Mixed with dirty water, it can carry disease. Stretched thin to make a tin last longer, it can leave a child chronically undernourished. Nothing about the powder itself changed. What changed was where it ended up. And it was about to end up in exactly the places least equipped to use it safely. So, back to the problem. How do you sell milk to a mother who already makes her own for free? You don't argue with her. You don't tell her breast milk is worse. You do something quieter than that. You make her doubt herself, and you do it in a place where she's already frightened and looking for guidance. A hospital. A maternity ward. The moment right after she's given birth. The promotion came in wearing the right clothes. Company representatives were presented or dressed in a way that led many new mothers to believe they were medical staff, nurses, health workers, people you were supposed to trust. So when the advice came to try the product, it didn't sound like a sales pitch. It sounded like a doctor's recommendation. And then came the part that made the whole thing work. The free sample. New parents were handed a supply at no cost, right there in the hospital. Enough to get through those first days, and on the surface, that looks like generosity. A gift. Help for someone exhausted and overwhelmed. But think about what's happening while she uses it. A woman's body makes milk on demand. The more her baby feeds, the more she produces. The less it feeds, the more her body assumes the milk isn't needed and slows down. Every bottle from that sample is a feeding her body doesn't count. Day by day, quietly, her own supply begins to fade. By the time the samples run out, many women find their supply has fallen, sometimes far enough that going back isn't nearly as easy as it was a few days before. And now the math has changed completely. She isn't choosing formula anymore. Formula has quietly become the only real option she has left. The customer was no longer deciding whether to buy. She was deciding how to afford it, again and again, for as long as her baby needed to eat. Whether it was intended or not, that dependence was the engine that made the whole strategy work. For a while, this worked exactly the way it was meant to. Sales climbed, new markets opened, and the people paying the real price were far away, in places the buyers back home never saw. Then, in 1974, a small British charity published a report. Its title didn't leave much room for interpretation. They called it the baby killer. It laid out how the product was being pushed in poor countries. The hospital sampling, the trusted figures, the women left dependent on something they couldn't safely afford. And once people read it, they couldn't unread it. What happened next wasn't just anger at one company. It became something bigger. A question the world hadn't really asked before. Should a company be allowed to advertise a substitute for breast milk the same way it advertises a soft drink? Should this kind of thing be marketing at all? That question turned into one of the largest organized consumer boycotts of its time. It started with Nestlé, the biggest name in the industry, and it spread across countries, into churches, universities, activist groups. People who would never meet a single one of those mothers decided to stop buying on their behalf. Now, it's worth being fair here because the story is often told in only one direction. Nestlé denied wrongdoing. The company argued that formula had a legitimate place, that it wasn't responsible for how the product was used once it was sold, and that the harshest version of the story overstated its role. Some of those points had merit, others didn't hold up as well, but the damage to its name was already done, and the pressure wasn't going away. The pressure kept building until it did something a boycott rarely manages to do. It changed the rules. In 1981, the World Health Organization, together with UNICEF, adopted an international code governing how breast milk substitutes could be marketed. And here's the part that almost everyone gets wrong. The code did not ban the product. It never tried to. It stayed legal, stayed on shelves, stayed a genuine lifeline for the women who truly needed it. What the code went after was the selling, the hospital sampling, the figures dressed as medical staff, the promotion that encouraged mothers to doubt something their bodies were already doing well. The rules that came out of this were never about the powder. They were about how you were allowed to sell it. Now, the hardest question is the one people most want a number for. How many children died? And the honest answer is that no one can tell you with certainty. The largest figures you'll see, the ones in the millions, had come mostly from advocacy groups, not from settled epidemiology, and they should be treated with real caution. But you don't need the biggest number for the story to matter. What isn't in dispute is this. Studies have linked this style of promotion to falling breastfeeding rates and worse infant health in exactly the places least able to absorb it. The exact toll is uncertain. The direction of the harm is not. It would be easy to end this by calling it history. A scandal from the 1970s, dealt with, corrected, closed. But the code the WHO wrote was never binding law in most places. It was a guideline, one that companies could follow or set aside, and in the decades since, accusations of violations never fully stopped. The trap didn't so much disappear as fade into the background, so it's worth being clear about what this story actually proves. It isn't that the product is evil or that a company set out to hurt anyone. We can't see into anyone's intentions, and we don't need to. What it proves is quieter, and in a way more unsettling. When something has only naturally limited demand, when most of the people you're selling to already have something better for free, a business can still find a way to widen that market. It can manufacture the need, and sometimes the cost of that doesn't show up on a balance sheet. It shows up in the lives of people who were simply trying to do right by their child and were told by someone they trusted that doing right came in a can.